Welcome, everyone. My name is Ingrid Tulloch. I'm an associate professor at Morgan State. I want to welcome you to today's event, which is the sixth in a series of educational programs that is the result of collaborations between multiple groups at Morgan State, Johns Hopkins. Together, these programs are designed to increase community awareness on topics related to aging, brain health, and Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, and to help highlight the importance of diverse participation in research and to allow a platform for open discussion and engagement around these topics. We're really happy to see you here and welcome you. As you can see, we have a really nice lineup. There'll be two parts to today's event. We will start with 4 brief presentations on the topic of nutrition and health and brain health. And following those presentations, there'll be a panel discussion moderated by the wonderful Dr. Alvin Hathaway, Sr. And this will provide an opportunity for you all to ask questions. So I will ask of you that throughout the session, you can please place any questions you might have in the chat box, or you can save them until the panel discussion and ask them then. And I also ask that you, again, please keep your microphone muted during the presentation and the panel discussion. And so I mentioned that this event is sponsored from a collaboration of multiple groups at Morgan State and Johns Hopkins. And I would like to acknowledge the organizers who work tirelessly to enable this and other events around this topic. The event is presented by Morgan State's Research Centers in Minority Institution, as well as Ascend and our newly established Center for Brain Health Research. It is co-sponsored by Morgan Cares, which is the community engagement component of the Center for Urban Health and Health Disparities Research and Innovation at Morgan, the Johns Hopkins Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, and Johns Hopkins Disease Resource Center for Minority Aging Research. So a virtual thank you for organizing this event. And also all the folks behind the scenes that ensured that we would get started. I will start out with, I mentioned that we have several speakers, and I'll start out by kind of providing everyone with a overview, just a big picture overview on the relationship between nutrition and gastrointestinal health, brain health, and Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. And from there, we'll have several other speakers on the list, as you see, who will present their work. And so to get started, I have on the screen this image of food, microbes, the brain, and their interconnections in brain health. As I mentioned, I will be giving just a big picture overview rather than in-depth research that will mention some of the statistics around brain health and the disparities involved, as well as the idea of food as medicine and medicine as food, as one of our presenters mentioned in the beginning as you all were logging in and we were having a discussion, that her cooking is medicine, right? I'll also give a brief overview as well on the gut microbiome, brain, nutrition, and microbiome interactions, and some practical applications along with my conclusion. And why is this topic important and why we decided to focus on this particular topic today? Mental, neurological, and substance use disorders, brain disorders, make up a significant component of disability for a huge percentage of the population in the US. And in fact, showing on the screen here, these disorders, which is shown by the blue in the middle, they're communicable diseases, but brain diseases, 23.8% contribution to daily life disabilities and years lived with a disability. When we look at these disorders, we can also see the variety of disorders, and you look at neurological disorders and the percentage over the lifespan. 54% between the ages of 15 and 19. Somewhat lesser but specific type of neurological diseases starts to show up with aging. And what I mean by that, if you look at this, the dark green section corresponding to Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, and you see as ages increase on the x-axis, you see this larger increase along the y-axis of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. And so this is a really significant percentage, 80%, right, of the diseases we're facing and in terms of disability involve Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. And it's a significant public health burden, very costly, and there are also disparities involved in these diseases and disorders. So it's really important and why we're here sharing this topic. For example, African Americans, 2 times as likely to have Alzheimer's disease. Latino Americans, 1.5 times as likely to have Alzheimer's disease. And it has been predicted that by 2030, over 60% of individuals with Alzheimer's and other dementias will belong to these groups that are underrepresented in the research arena, these ethnic groups. Of course, this idea of food as medicine is not anything new. Hippocrates is credited with the quote, "Let thy medicine and let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." And that's because we now know today that the brain consumes a significant portion of our daily caloric intake, about 20%. And that's approximately 400 calories a day. And we also now know that food choice is a major predictor of mental health risk. As well as mental health conditions themselves. So this is a bi-directional relationship. Mental health conditions can also affect food choice, which could be problematic. So food play a very significant role. There's been, over the years, several research studies detailing how the Western diet is not the best kind of diet for brain health. And other diets, such as the DASH and the MIND diet, which are variations on the Mediterranean diet, have really positive impact on brain health and has been associated with actually lowering the risk for Alzheimer's disease. This might be due to their relatively anti-inflammatory effects.
Did you buy a battery for your computer?
I'm sorry, I'm in a meeting. Anti-inflammatory effects. And these diets, what makes them really beneficial, it's the inclusion of whole grains, fibers, good fats, all while limiting salt and sugars and saturated fats and fried foods. And as if you're like me, all the bad stuff tastes really, really good. And until you get used to eating mostly good stuff, it might seem not so good, right? And our standard Western diet is more of the latter rather than the former. And so food plays a role And as scientists, we, and a variety of scientists, including myself, have been delving into the processes by which food can play this role in brain health. And one process that you'll hear about a lot more today is that of the microbiome, which consists of microorganisms or microbes that mostly the gut microbiome you'll hear about. And these are microorganisms that live in the gut, because we're made up of a lot more non-human cells than human cells. And the relationship between these organisms in our gut can predict health outcomes. Most of the organisms are what we call the good microorganisms. And when you have a good balance of these good microorganisms, you tend to be in a more healthy state because they're involved in producing a variety of vitamins. For example, vitamin B12 is produced by microbes in the gut. It is the source of vitamin B12 unless you're taking supplements. These microbes play a role in the production of neurotransmitters, particularly those neurotransmitters that are associated with a variety of psychological, mental, and neurological disorders. But also in the gut are what we call pathogenic microbes. Under normal, healthy, balanced conditions, they're fewer in number. But when you get out of balance, what we call dysbiosis, you get an increase in production of these microbes, and they secrete or contribute to greater levels of inflammation, which also plays a role in Alzheimer's disease, or it is thought to be involved in Alzheimer's disease and other aging-related mental disorders. So foods and beverages, the things we consume, provide nutrients, not only to us, but also to these organisms. And they can alter the diversity of the species in the gut, and thereby either contributing to good health or not so good health. Beyond the food and the microbiome and the brain interactions, there are also things external like stress. And stress can also impact the functioning of the microbiome in microbiome diversity, and also lead to poor eating behaviors, which in turn, again, would impact brain health. And this image on the screen that I hope everyone can see is showing some of the relationships, some which are bidirectional. I know it looks kind of all these different paths that involves the unhealthy eating and how that contributes to the brain, as well as stress. Post-traumatic stress disorder, for example, can also contribute to the brain health. And then you can have a toxic combination when you add fatty foods that impact the lining of the intestine and cause leaky gut, which bidirectionally is associated with the gut microbiome and also inflammation. So you have a complex, and it's a very complex mix of processes going on. Of course, there are barriers and challenges to incorporating healthy eating, and there are other factors such as, for example, living in food deserts that might impact access to healthy food for someone to follow the DASH diet. But just to sum it all up, I'll say mental, neurological, and substance use disorders contribute significantly to disability and adjusted life years, and the disparities in diagnosis and access further exacerbate the issue. And nutrition is something that we can somewhat control. And so it emerges as a very pivotal factor in mitigating the risk and progression to brain disorders, including Alzheimer's and other dementias. And through the interactions between the food we eat, the gut microbiome, and the brain, you can regulate brain function and health. And despite the factors that can interfere with brain health, I think we have an opportunity, provided we have the knowledge and the access, to mitigate these factors. And so you will hear from some of our other speakers about how that can be done and what's being done. And our first speaker would be Dr. Calliope Holingue. Dr. Holingue is an assistant professor at the Center for Autism Services, Science, and Innovation at Kennedy Krieger Institute. She also has a joint academic appointment in the Department of Mental Health at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And her research focuses on promoting the health of individuals with neurodevelopmental and psychiatric disorders by studying the relationship between physical and mental health. With a focus on the gut-brain axis, she teaches several courses at Johns Hopkins, and one in particular that's relevant to our topic here is on mental health in the gut. I am very pleased to present to you Dr. Calliope Holingue. Thank you for being here with us, and we're all looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us about the gut microbiome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tulloch, and I really, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you. So let me go ahead and, okay, can Dr. Hathaway or Dr. Tulloch, can you confirm that you can see the right set of slides?
I can.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so I'll just go ahead and jump in. We already got a pretty great overview on microbiome, but I'm going to give a little bit more detail. So the human microbiome is defined as the collective genomes or genetic material of all of the microbes that live inside and on the human body. So this includes the bacteria, fungi, protozoa, viruses, anything on our skin and inside of our body. The genetic material of those critters, if you will, are what make up the human microbiome. And the microbiome actually begins to develop during the birthing process. So whether someone is born vaginally or by C-section actually determines the sort of initial composition of that person's microbiome. The complexity of that microbiome really begins to increase during that first year of infancy. And then towards the end of year one is when the microbiome starts to look more like an adult microbiome. That being said, it really continues to be dynamic across the life course. And I'll share a little bit more about that a little bit later in my presentation. So about 50% of the cells in our body are bacterial cells. And this, of course, raises some interesting scientific questions, as well as the philosophical questions of what makes us human, right? Because we are, intimately connected with these microbes. The diversity of microbes actually varies by anatomic sites, meaning that the different parts of our bodies have vastly different types of microbial communities. And what these microbial communities look like and what they do, that varies with our health, our genetics, our hygiene, our diet, and all sorts of other factors. And in fact, within each of us, the communities of microbes within our body and across these different sites are so different that there's actually more differences within us than between two individuals. And I find that quite fascinating. What is particularly exciting about the microbiome is that it's a fluctuating collection of genetic material. That means that it's plastic or malleable over the life course. It's susceptible to environmental changes like antibiotics or other medications, infections, and that's what makes the microbiome a really attractive target for manipulation, is the fact that we know that we can change it. And as Dr. Tulloch said, one of the main ways that we can change it that's within our control, of course, is diet. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And so when we have what's called a balanced signature or a balanced relationship with our microbiome, that is really when we are able to experience the health benefit that these microbes give us. So we have ideally a symbiotic relationship with them. When they need us to survive and thrive, we need them to survive and thrive. And it's really when we get a disruption of this balance, what's called dysbiosis, that we are more susceptible to disease. And this is just a little visual schematic of what dysbiosis might look like. So on the left-hand side, you'll see what we could liken to a normal balanced microbiota, where there are many different colors of jelly beans. They're all mixed together. We see this incredible amount of diversity. And then if we have a state of dysbiosis, that's what it looks like on the right, where all of a sudden that diversity is really shriveled down to a few different colors. And as you can imagine, you no longer have all of the microbes that you need to carry out the essential functions of your body and to really protect you against various environmental stressors. I love that we're both quoting Hippocrates back to back, but yes, the awareness about the importance of the gut is not new. And both of these quotes have been attributed to Hippocrates. So, you know, this is age-old wisdom that that the gut seems to be very important in not only brain health, but in our whole body in general. However, the microbiome has recently experienced a real resurgence in interest. It's become quite a hot topic. This is just some screenshots of books or headlines that you may have seen over the years. It seems like everybody is talking about the microbiome and the gut microbiome in popular. It's almost become a household name. And so naturally there's been you know, a lot of science and attention that's gone to this recently. So now shifting a little bit more to the gut microbiome and the GI system. So I just want to clarify that when I'm talking about the gastrointestinal or the GI tract, I'm talking about that hollow muscular tube. It starts at the mouth, it goes through to our stomach, our intestines, ultimately our rectum. And the main function here is, of course, the digestion and absorption of food. But as you can see from this schematic of a cross section, in addition to sort of this muscular tube, there's all sorts of mucosal layers. There are immune cells and really complex processes going on. And this is where the gut microbiome is actually playing a key role. So you may have heard of the term second brain. This is more formally known as the enteric nervous system, and it really consists of this mesh-like system of many millions of neurons that govern the function of the GI tract. And these neurons are embedded in the lining of our GI system. The reason it's called the second brain is that this system can actually operate independently of our central nervous system. So that means if you severed that connection, the enteric nervous system would still be able to carry out a lot of its functions. Another really cool fact is that the second brain, or the ENS, uses over 30 neurotransmitters. And in fact, in thinking about sort of the relationship to brain health and neurodevelopment and psychiatry, it's fascinating to note that the GI system actually produces 90% of our body's serotonin and about 50% of our body's dopamine. So that in of itself tells us that the gut is important for these brain health processes. And then, as you might expect, the response of the GI system is influenced by what we eat, the bulk of what we eat. And then if the gut becomes irritated or distended, that sends up nerves and signals to the brain. And so there really is this bidirectional communication between the two of them. The gut microbiome has a lot of different roles. I won't go into all of them today, but it has to do with communicating with different bacteria to protect against pathogens, producing vitamins and nutrients, metabolism, our immune system, even influencing our own human gene expression, functions that have to do with you know, digestion and absorption, of course, and then, as we'll talk about today, the gut-brain communication and how it relates to behavior. So one question you may be asking yourself is, what is a healthy gut? And this has been quite a big question in the field, as you can imagine. And really what the consensus is at this point is that it has less to do with particular microbes and more with the diversity of microbes that you see in the gut. So what, as you may recall from that sort of jelly bean picture, it really has to do with having a lot of different types of microbes that carry out different functions, and that as an ecosystem are resilient to environmental insults. Now, as I said, the microbiome is malleable or plastic across the life course. And so as you think about someone's life, it's important to consider what are the exposures that may be influencing their microbiome. So when you think of sort of infancy, toddlerhood, whether the infant is breastfed or formula fed, when and what solid foods are introduced. When you think about childhood, perhaps the administration of antibiotics or other medications, the quality of the diet. And then as we age into older adulthood, what kind of chronic physical health conditions do we experience, and how do those shape the microbiome? So there are all sorts of things across the life course that have the potential to interact with our microbiome and our gut microbiome in particular. And then when thinking about sort of the importance of the microbiome in terms of brain development, it's important to note that the sort of complexity and the development of the gut microbiome actually parallels what's happening in the brain. So this is a really lovely paper that outlines these parallel processes. And you see this increasing neuronal complexity at the same time that you see this increasing diversity in our microbiome. And that, of course, coincide with windows of vulnerability or susceptibility to different brain and psychiatric conditions. I won't go into a lot of depth here, but I just want to highlight that there are a lot of different ways in which the gut and the brain communicate. This includes things like key metabolites that our gut microbiome produces, things like short-chain fatty acids, cytokines that are produced, the vagus nerve, which is a major way that the gut and brain communicate bidirectionally, and there's much, much more. I unfortunately don't have time to go into a lot of detail today, but this is an excellent paper if you're interested in reading a little bit more about what those mechanisms are in the context of neurodegenerative diseases. So I won't go into a lot of depth here about what Alzheimer's disease is. I think everyone here is familiar. So I'll just keep moving on. But what I want to spend a little bit of time on is what are some potential mechanisms by which the gut microbiome could be influencing the risk or progression of Alzheimer's disease. So what we know from literature is that it seems that changes in the gut microbiome composition, so what microbes you have, can influence the permeability of your gut, meaning what your gut or your GI lining allows into the blood circulation as opposed to what it keeps in that lumen or inside of the GI tract. How permeable the gut is will then influence the level of inflammation throughout the body, which has the potential to then impair the blood-brain barrier and what gets into the brain. That, of course, can promote neuroinflammation and neuronal injury, and that is what is thought to facilitate neurodegeneration and phenotypes that we see that are consistent with Alzheimer's disease. We also know that some gut bacteria, are capable of producing amyloid proteins that are very similar in terms of their structure with amyloid beta. And so this is thought to be another way that AD pathology is accelerated. And then lastly, we know that microbiota can affect the central nervous system by producing neurotransmitters and neuromodulators, which we know are key to brain function. Now, what is some evidence that we have for this link between the gut microbiome and Alzheimer's disease? So in terms of animal studies, there have been some studies of germ-free mice. These are mice in which the microbes have been completely removed. And that shows that the absence of these gut microbes actually leads to significant changes in brain amyloid deposition and immune activation. In human studies, we have clinical studies starting to show associations between dysbiosis in the gut and Alzheimer's disease. So we see that patients with Alzheimer's tend to have different gut microbiota compared to healthy individuals, and it's thought that that might contribute to the progression of the disease. And then we also have some evidence from experimental or intervention studies. So in terms of animal studies, these are obviously much more feasible to do than human studies for, ethical and practical reasons. But for example, we've seen from animal literature that specific antibiotic treatments lead to changes in the diversity of the gut microbiome. That is in turn correlated with reduced amyloid deposition and altered inflammatory responses in the brain. Second, there's evidence that administration of probiotics, these are sort of termed good bacteria that help benefit our microbes, help benefit our health. These are things like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. These are shown to reduce brain damage and the accumulation of amyloid beta, in turn modulating inflammatory cytokine levels and gut hormones. And then lastly, there's evidence that prebiotics decrease brain tissue swelling, apoptosis, downregulate the expression of amyloid in these animal models. And then in terms of human studies, we also have this evidence. There's a clinical study showing that a 12-week supplementation with probiotics resulted in significant improvement in Alzheimer's MMSE scores, and that dietary changes affect the gut microbiota composition. And this has been led to reductions in neurodegenerative diseases, as the prior speaker outlined. So that's a bit of a whirlwind on this topic, but happy to take questions later. And as was mentioned, I do teach a summer course about this, and I welcome you to reach out if you're interested in taking it. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Our next speaker is Chef Thomas, Chef Taueret. I thought I would get it right.
You have it, Taueret.
Thomas. Chef Thomas is the owner of Kefira's Kitchen. It's an elite chef service for individuals and organizations who require personalized creation of great food. Her food as medicine cooking style exemplifies the use of classical techniques, bold flavors, and her love of global cuisines. With 28 years of culinary excellence, Chef Thomas is a leader in her field, as well as the youngest and first Black woman to lead a culinary college in the state of Maryland and to earn the highly regarded Certified Hospitality Educator certification. Chef Thomas is also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, a music lover, enjoys traveling, and naturally the artistry of cooking. We're very excited to have Chef Thomas share her approach and to and the importance of healthy meal prep for persons living with dementia. Welcome, Chef Thomas. The floor is all yours.
Well, thank you so much. I don't have any slides, but I want to tell you that I love talking about food, and certainly with the two presentations so far, the importance of eating nutritious and enjoyable meals for individuals living with any brain health diseases, Alzheimer's, dementia. It cannot be overstated. The more that we learn about the health of older adults, the more we understand that we must take a proactive stance on eating healthy, choosing great dietary choices. It's a necessity to address our health concerns as we age. And so ultimately, we want to eat foods that are high or rich in antioxidants, giving you the vitamins and minerals that you need, as well as the essential nutrients. And so, I am a Black daughter caregiver. My mom has been living with Alzheimer's for close to 15 years. And in my own personal research, right, of understanding, I guess, of me trying to understand how she got to this point in her life was, looking back on her eating lifestyle. And so, she was a sugar lover. She drank a lot of sodas. She was diagnosed with diverticulitis, which is essentially a inflammation of your digestive tract, as I come to understand it, inflammation forming in her gut, right? And so as I now can have some control over her choices of eating, it's important to think about how to continue to provide delicious meals for her at this stage of her life. So there's some concerns that come about with people who are living with Alzheimer's. You having swallowing difficulties or chewing difficulties. You can forget to chew. You can, it just leaves you, right? So you got to take that in consideration when you're modifying say their meals and in terms of their texture of foods. Making healthy, colorful choices of ingredients. So my idea, certainly you hear the terms of farm to table eating, and basically farm to table is just making quality choices and getting the best quality ingredients that you can, as well as having some of the freshest ingredients. So to break that down, the farm to table. And so, vegetables, fruits and vegetables, healthy fats, eating these things to, help you be well. And so, I like to cook a lot of vegetable soups. That's a great way to make nutrient dense meals. So we're talking about, your carrots, your peas, spinach, your butternut squashes, certainly mushrooms, I think is an ingredient that everyone needs to be eating. And I know we have someone that might be talking and addressing that later. But sweet potatoes, tomatoes, these foods are certainly rich in antioxidants. And so when we talk about, antioxidants, it's just that we're trying to prevent cell damage. And so we want to opt for foods that are nutritious. But if you know of someone who has Alzheimer's or having issues with their swallowing, so certainly having some softer foods, bananas, cooked apples. My mother had a sweet tooth. And so I would say that giving your loved one, a healthy dessert can be in the form of fruits, making fruit kebabs, drinking watermelon juice or eating watermelon, your plums, wonderful, colorful foods, right? And let's not forget about flavor enhancements. And so when I talk about my cooking style, I will characterize it as using bold flavors. So I love using those aromatics that add to the food, that make the food unique in terms of, say, ginger and cardamom, your cumin, your smoked paprika, your turmeric, right? And these can add color to your food as well as flavor. And we know that, using spices and herbs have healthful benefits, certainly. You can add them to your smoothies. You can add them to shakes. You can add them to your one-pot meals. So, making chilies and different types of stews, pasta dishes with, vegetables like squash and cauliflower and broccoli and red peppers, adding some variety is a wonderful thing. And let's not forget about, I guess, hydration. You know, my mom was not a big fan of drinking water. Not sure what's going on in the background. But hydration is extremely important. Encouraging drinking water and other helpful beverages is crucial to overall well-being. And if you think about any changes that might be happening with your loved one in terms of trying to get them to drink, I know that, you know, my father, who's my mom's primary caregiver, you know, he gives her a straw. He gives a colored cup, right? To help her drink more water. Adding lemon, mint, cucumbers, right? Things that can be more enticing, and adding some flavor to help your loved one drink some water. So, you know, meal prep speaks about having that plan and thinking about what a conscious thinking about what am I going to eat. And so, you know, as said before, certainly eating a Mediterranean diet is more beneficial. You know, adding those olive oils and coconut oils, these things that will provide some of the omega-3 fatty acids that we need to help us digest our foods and help us in our body is certainly important. But you have to be thinking about limiting, as always, limiting your processed foods. I mean, it's simple as that. You're reducing your sugar intake. You know, eating more legumes, your beans, you know, your kidney beans, where, you know, you have your red kidney beans, your cannellini beans, your white beans, having those healthful nuts, adding to our diet. These are things you can add as snacks, you know, having a nice nut when you have that food craving, instead of reaching for those bags of chips, those almonds and walnuts and things, you know. But I would say if you're meal prepping, you want to try something new, you know, try a new recipe. You know, I would say certainly if you're cooking for a loved one who is dealing with Alzheimer's, you got to be patient. You have to be gentle with them, because a lot of changes are occurring in their mind as well as in their body. And I will tell you, a lot of the foods that I prepare and give to my mom now, she would never have eaten. That wasn't her choice. She would not have liked, I mean, she wasn't a big a yogurt eater, but now, you know, she eats yogurt. She hated bananas, but she, you know, now because she doesn't can't challenge you, you know, so much, she eats them. And but I can tell when I bring something that she, you know, she can smell and she can get excited about it. She wants to, you know, she eats it with no problem. So trying some different flavor profiles, trying a variety of foods is something that I really try to encourage. And my take on food as medicine is something that I have instituted in my own personal life for the last 15 years, you know, figuring out what my body needs so that I'm, you know, going to function at my optimal health. So You know, you celebrate the small victories in certainly in preparing meals for your loved ones that they, you know, enjoy. And it's okay if they eat the same thing. I would say, you know, there's nothing wrong with having the same meal, you know, for a few days out of the week. But certainly, you know, exposing yourself as well as your loved ones to some different menu choices is always good. And so, yeah, you know, I'm just a big foodie. And I just love to talk about how you can eat more healthy, you can take control of your own health, and you can do that with food all the time. So I'm looking forward to the discussion as we move on, but that's my presentation.
Thank you so much, Chef Thomas. I enjoy hearing you say all of this. My dad also had Alzheimer's, and he had a sweet tooth, and I know it was a really struggle for my mom to get him to eat well. My mom always ate well, but he liked his sweets, and so she had to put everything in the blender and add all these different colors, just exactly like you said. You know, colorful food really what got him through his sweet tooth. Thank you so much for sharing that. We really appreciate that. And just a reminder for everyone, put your questions in the chat, or just save them until we get to the panel. Our next speaker is Dr. Terris King Sr. Dr. King is the CEO of King Enterprise Group. It's a consulting firm focused on improving the health of vulnerable populations through equity and access programs. He is also senior pastor at the Liberty Grace Church of God. Dr. King's professional background spans an impressive range of positions that include an executive role with AT&T, service in the federal government. He also launched the Lucan Group, which is an entity that serves as an interface between healthcare and the church. And it includes sponsoring health improvement efforts. Dr. King is committed to transforming healthcare by creating scalable, innovative models that seek to lower costs and improve the health of vulnerable American populations. Today, we're really excited to hear him present on one of these one of his approaches, the Engage with Heart initiative, which is designed to reduce health disparities. Engage.
That's it.
Engage.
You got it.
Yeah,
You got it.
to reduce health disparities through health education, healthy eating, and preventative cardiovascular screenings through outreach with local churches. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Terris King Sr.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you, Chef Thomas. That was a very comprehensive presentation that really took us into the nuts and bolts of eating. Now, what I want to do is kind of back up for a second and take that chef, if you can imagine, and it's hard to imagine anyone with her set of qualifications because she had it, and then spread that among 6 locations. So in January of 2023, Novartis, a pharmaceutical company, very strange partner that I thought in terms of partnering with the African-American community to address the issues of health inequities, came to me through a group by the name of Global Coalition on Aging. And what they were doing, they were looking at 300 cities across the country to determine who to award $1,500,000 worth of money to address health inequities. And out of those 300 cities, we were in the final 3 when I met them. I met them at the Zeta Center on Righteoustown Road. And I talked about the things that, thanks to Dr. Hathaway, I had a chance to do while leading the religious community through the COVID vaccine effort. I had a chance then of working with all the churches and synagogues and mosques, along with our public health office in Johns Hopkins. And along with Dr. Hathaway, I had a chance to set up those vaccines across the city. So I had a network of religious leaders, if you will, who had come to me because my background as a senior executive for the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services and someone who had established the Office of Minority Health had put me in a good position to understand healthcare from a policy perspective. But strangely enough, I didn't see the assets in our communities. I saw social determinants of health as challenges. I saw food apartheid or food deserts as challenges. But one of the primary assets, I will say to you, is the church. Every church is not a community-based church, but a community-based church is a trusted source in a community, because that's the kind of church that before there's an emergency is already serving the people, not only in their congregation, but in the community. Well, at the end of the day, we won. And so Novartis asked me with a blank sheet of paper to come up with my plan. And they did that because they knew I had the experience to set up the kind of plan and program necessary to affect our people. And so was born Engage with Heart. Engage with Heart is at 6 locations. Mount Pleasant Church and Ministries, one of the largest churches in the city. The Lord's Church on Park Heights. Sweet Hope on Garrison Boulevard. My church, Liberty Grace Church of God in Ashburton, the Zeta Center, as I mentioned earlier, where I met them, and Sandtown Community Center. What do? What is the program all about? It's really what the chef just talked about. We are bringing people in on a monthly basis. This was phase 1, to really enjoy a wonderful meal, even if you don't want to come for service. I use the language or the lexicon of the church for healthcare purposes. Family and Friends Day. Every Black church knows about Family and Friends Days. So once a month, these churches will have Family and Friends Days, where you come together and you enjoy a meal and you fellowship together. You invite your guests. You show off what your church is really all about. You make people feel welcome. The only difference is now when you come in, we're not only giving you that, a great meal, because I agree, food is medicine, but we don't want our food to taste like medicine. I made sure that this program values what the African American culture is all about. And a major part of that is our food. So I challenged the chefs. I said, can you work a diet around Dash and Mediterranean? This is exactly what I did. That is tasty. I don't want to taste cardboard. I want to look forward to the meal that I have. And so these chefs at these talented churches came together to do that. And so it drew people together. We had several thousand meaningful conversations with people. We had people come to every church once a month in the hundreds. It was a tremendous success, not only for the meal, but after the meal was done, one of the things that we would do was bring in food. Sometimes, of course, people can't get to a healthy meal. So we partner with the Black Food Security Network. Pastor Brown, Dr. Brown himself. Great job in bringing us healthy food so that normally people would purchase the food from the farmers that are in Baltimore. We are one of the churches that have an urban garden with Pastor Brown. Churches all over the city have gardens with him. We bring in food from farmers across Baltimore City. We let the people know, here's what farm it came from. We advertise the farm, food to table, farm to table. They know what farm it came from. They can ride by it and it's on their table. They can trust it. They're receiving food from a trusted place inside a trusted source that they feel some partial ownership of. What happens after the meal? After the meal, then they get screenings. Screenings on what? Heart health, cholesterol, lipids, A1C levels. All of these things are screened by Johns Hopkins. And then if your numbers are high, we refer that information to your doctor. What is phase 2? It's been so successful in phase 1, absolutely blown it away. In terms of looking at the savings, let me say something here. Let me slow down to give you a description of what I'm doing. I don't want to talk about disparities in health equity. I understand as a policymaker at the highest levels of government, that is not what will move the needle. Talk about the heart will not do it. Talk about caring will not do it. You have to show savings. You have to show that you're able to save the healthcare system, to save the payer, whether public or private, money, to save the hospital money. And if simultaneously you can improve the healthcare of the disinherited, those who are underserved and under-resourced, that's a great byproduct. And that's exactly what we're focused on doing. So this program has been endorsed, phase 1. Phase 1 endorsed when we had our kickoff by Mayor Senator Ben Cardin, of course, by Novartis, by our governor, who really saw exactly what we were doing in this program. And not only did he see it, so did other providers. Now to phase 2. Phase 2 starts in 2 weeks. So what are we going to go to in that process? It's unbelievable what has happened. Johns Hopkins Hospital, Bayview, is sending us patients who are grappling with their social determinants of health, who are working with their social workers, who are working with their community health workers. Because we also have in this process 20 community health ambassadors who are really community health workers who are anchored to an anchor institution in the community. See, what happens too often, people from outside the community try to come in the community and prescribe a method of change to the community without first talking to the community about what they need and what they want in the way that they want it. Engage with Heart did not start that way. First, I spent several months talking to my community, and the community told me that they did not trust the church because it was too insulary in its thinking. We thought only about ourselves. And they didn't trust the provider institutions because of, I don't even have to say. So what we did exactly what they said. We brought the experts to the church house, and we watched and ensured that people are receiving quality care. Now Hopkins is going to send us their patients so that we can ensure that they are not readmitted after heart attack or after heart disease, so that we can help them navigate the issues of housing, transportation, and food. Social determinants of health. Because my former employer is requiring all hospitals now to report information about social determinants of health. And what is University of Maryland? They've also signed up. The way you determine whether a community is under-resourced and underserved is by the number of doctors that they have to serve their issues per capita. So what is University of Maryland doing? They are sending us optometrists. They're sending us foot doctors, eye doctors, people to help you with your blood pressure, a laundry list of services in the church. So people, just get this. I can come to church, get a rousing message from the preacher, be inspired, have that work on my mental capacity. Then I can go downstairs and receive my medicine. And my medicine tastes like a 5-star restaurant. And the service they receive feels that way. Then I can have an appointment with my dentist upstairs during my main course and come back down, have time for dessert, and before I leave, see my foot doctor. What kind of church is this? A community-based church who's leading the way, who's setting the precedent, who's setting itself as it is, as an asset to the community, who's leading a process in a new way to focus on disparities, but also on the issue we've been talking about tonight, to address the diet, become where the community are, and don't ignore the environment that people are in. And don't look at the people as if they're victims, and don't blame them for their situation, but provide them a helping hand and a leg up so that the least, the last, and the lost can improve their health. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I see the virtual hands. Exactly. You provided us some medicine this evening.
Thank you.
And I think you gave us a major solution to the issues that we've been discussing all night. You've demonstrated it. And with that, we will be moving into our panel discussion, which will be moderated by Reverend Dr. Alvin Hathaway. And I will introduce Dr. Hathaway, and just ask everyone, prepare your questions. Reverend Dr. Alvin Hathaway, Sr., and now retired, was the 10th pastor in Union Baptist Church. Reverend Hathaway has 2 terminal degrees, including a PhD in philosophy of religion from the North Carolina College of Theology and a Doctor of Ministry degree from the United Theological Seminary. He is the president and CEO of the beloved Community Services Incorporation and one of the founding principals of the African Ancestry Neuroscience Research Initiative. He's also the founder of Act Now Baltimore, a faith-based community action network. Dr. Hathaway is a contributing author to several books and publications, and he has received incredible recognition for his service and civic contributions. Dr. Hathaway, You'll be moderating this panel, and for our audience members, this is the time for your questions.
And we are ready. And if I may, we had 4 out of church language. You had 4 amazing sermons given back to back to back. So all you could do was just shout. Each round took you higher and higher. If I may, I will call you Dr. Ingrid, Dr. Calliope, Chef Thomas, and Dr. King. As you talked, one person wrote about water, hydration. And I wonder, could each of you speak about the importance when the body is about 60%, almost 70% water? What is the role of water? Is water seen as a food? Is water seen as a nutrient? Is water seen as important to brain health? And you can go in any particular order. Who wants to respond first may do so.
Well, I'll chime in, Dr. Hathaway, and I will tell you that water is my beverage of choice. And certainly not all water is the same. So when people tell me that, water doesn't have a taste, I will certainly tell you that I disagree. I am a super taster, and I can tell you that there is a difference in the waters that you drink, and that it is very, very, very important to our health and our body. So I think it's crucial, as I said, to our overall well-being. And the more water you drink, I believe the better off you are. It helps in clearing your sinuses. It removes toxins from your body. I believe in drinking room temperature water. Certainly. I like to drink out of glass or stainless steel. So I'm very conscious of the water that I intake. I am not a scientist, but I will certainly tell you that I believe it is essential for us.
Dr. Calliope, what do you say on that? How would you see it from the perspective of a scientist?
Yeah, great question. And thank you, Chef Thomas, for that answer. I'll just build on that and sort of speak from the gut perspective, which is that water is so important to keep things moving, right? To flush out those toxins, to make sure, bowel movements are happening regularly. We know that that is just critical to feeling well overall. Sometimes water may not be the most enticing drink. So finding ways to make it more enticing. I think Chef Thomas, you mentioned lemons, for example. There's so many different types of sort of flavored seltzered water. So finding a way that makes it enjoyable for you is really important. I think it can't be overstated how important that is to our overall health and our brain health.
I'd like to get Dr. King in there because since we both come out the church, we know that there's a particular drink in the church called sweet tea.
Yes, we do, Doc. Yes, we do.
So,
yes.
So I just wonder, how do you introduce a more wholesome, less liquid to your congregate members?
So this has been interesting, because I think the word last used was enticing. So everything about our program has been framed from an issue of enticing. And it has to be enticing, not just to the churchgoer. I want to emphasize this, because often when we have these discussions, and it's a church-based initiative, often the question is asked, what about non-churchgoers? What do you do with others? And, it's strange to me, because as I've done things for the government, nobody ever asked me then, what are you going to do for church people? Nobody ever asked me that when I was in the government. But with all people that I serve, what I say to my chefs is infused. I've seen them go in that direction. They're taking the water because our folk will not do the straight stuff. You got to ease them into it. So if they can do water first that's infused with some kinds of fruits, then people go, first of all, people go with the mindset that healthy is nasty. Healthy is, it doesn't taste well. Healthy is something I don't want. So our mindset as a team has been, we're going to slowly move them to a process that says healthy can be good, that you can have some water here that not only looks pretty, but when you taste it, you say, it has a good taste to it. And it was absolutely right what was said earlier. Water does have a taste. And if you can give people what they want and take those sugars out, you can accomplish your goal. And that's how we handle it.
That's great. That's great. Dr. Cope, you mentioned in your presentation about specific antibiotic treatments. And could you expand on that and maybe help us understand what that means?
Yeah, and I'm seeing, thank you. I'm seeing that question in the chat. To be honest, I'd have to pull up that exact paper that I was citing and make sure I'm not misleading anyone, but let me just pull that up and see if I can add some context. Okay, yes. So that was speaking to animal studies in particular. So what I can do is provide my email address or follow up. Corinne might be the best person to send this to perhaps, and make sure that I can get that information to you. But this was specifically in an animal model, and I think it was a broad spectrum antibiotic, meaning it's one that really has a widespread effect on the gut. But I'm going to get back to you with those particular details to make sure I'm giving you the right information.
That's great. That's great. I'm looking through some of this, and I have a person that asked this question: neurodegeneration. I guess they were talking about fasting and light diets. Is there any reaction to the role of fasting or just light diets in terms of your eating habits? Any reaction to that from the panel?
I can tackle that a little. There have been some studies in particular animal studies that suggests intermittent fasting sort of resets the metabolic clock. And so that contributes to the regulation of inflammation, for example. And we've heard inflammation coming up several times about that. So that's what I understand about the intermittent fasting. And I would say light diet, but intermittent fasting is what I'm most familiar and what I've seen in the literature.
One of the things, and we kind of maybe got about another 7 minutes, but what is interesting to me is that I'm seeing this whole movement towards how do we engage the community in its own health practices. And so the people in the academy are saying, wait a minute, how do we go from the gown to the town? And we had Dr. King present a perspective that you go through trusted sources, you go through, in his instance, the faith-based institution, solid community-based institutions. But how do we as practitioners become a trusted source? What do we have to do so that people can trust that the information that we are delivering to them is to their best benefit? One, that they are not being used or guinea pigs in the process, but that this is a good, healthy practice for you to develop. How do we, as persons in the academy, persons in the that may have titles or degrees, how do we now become a trusted source? And I just throw that out to you as just as a point of conversation.
I think, can I jump in here?
Yes, please.
I think one of the critical roles that I play, both as a person who has degrees and a scientific doctorate in occupational science and has served as an executive in healthcare, is people often see us as translators. So how the bridge to those worlds. And so when you ask the question, what can we do? I think a major part of it is to allow them to critique. I think what you heard earlier, I think when, for example, I was able to say, not only are my partners here, I was fine sitting at the table when my partners from Hopkins were seemingly, they went after them for, hey, we distrust you for these things that have happened historically. But then I had to take it when it came at me and be able to respond in a way that people could see I was genuine by my actions. My actions said, okay, that's fair. Now here's what I'm going to do in response to that. So I think it's showing our actions, is demonstrating, and it's making sure that I'm not talking down to them, that with all the degrees that God has blessed me to have, I have no right to talk down to anyone because they don't have letters behind their name. So it's my responsibility to take the information I have and to bring it to you in a way that's helpful to them. So that's the role I think I have in this process that can really build and escalate the role of the church, because it's not only helpful for the community. Let's be honest here. That role is helpful for the church because it's a draw, if not to church membership, to church services.
Any other response to what can we do, or particularly for those who find themselves in the academy, looking at data, looking at reading literature? How do you become a trusted source in the community?
I was just going to jump in and echo what Dr. King said in terms of the authenticity. But I think another piece of it, which you also spoke to, is working with people, working with the population that you're serving. So a lot of my work, for example, is in the autism community, and there is a revival right now in the field, and excitement about partnering with autistic individuals to do that sort of research. That is relatively new for the autism field. And I think the same can be applied to a lot of different areas, and saying, how do we co-design research? How do we think through what research is important, what outcomes are important, what the community wants to see? And I think when you're truly engaged in that and honest about that, and people see that you're serious about that, then they start to see you as a trusted partner. But it takes time, and it certainly doesn't happen overnight. And I think Dr. King's success with his community is a testament to the many years of relationship building that he's put in.
I would also say for some of us, to a few of us, we are members of the community.
Right.
I grew up in a community very much like Baltimore City. All my family members are church, very big in the church. And in fact, I first started thinking about health because of being in the church. That's where I was exposed to mindfulness. That's where I was exposed to the importance of fasting, and cooking, because my great-grandmother cooked for the church, and she was a diabetic and never took medicine. And then she lived to 93, never had to take medicine, and got her sugar down because of how her blood sugar down because of how she cooked. So I learned a lot about healthy cooking and using the right choices. And I would even say the community actually has some of the answers, even if they don't realize, right? And so along with the sweet tea, we would cook those collard greens, right? And
And
that's
drink
good
the
for you.
liquid.
So,
And drink the
yes.
pot liquor. And drink the
Right.
pot liquor.
Ah,
So
boy.
it's
Uh-oh, y'all
saying,
starting to have church now. All right.
you don't have to eliminate everything
Uh,
that's part
no.
of your culture. It's saying, hey, we have good things in our community too, and maybe we need to promote those things more, and promote the things that are not so good less. And reminding them, yeah, it's a reason why your grandmother said eat the yams, and it's a reason why you had to eat your collards, and it's a reason why you had to have that cod liver oil before school started. I don't know if
Wow.
anyone's old enough
yeah,
to
yeah,
remember
yeah,
that,
yeah.
right?
I do.
The
Absolutely.
omega-3 fatty acids and all of those things. So as someone in the academy, that prompted me to start going back to look at the things that I grew up with and to say, well, what were the good things? And then when I start talking about my research and I tell my family members, yeah, I'm studying saffron and I'm studying turmeric, and they're like, see, then I'm more trusted because they see that I'm not putting down things that are important culturally, right? Those spices had a purpose. So that's another way that we can build trust, is to some members of the community are researchers as well and academics,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
to give us voice.
And it's those large organizations valuing the expertise
Yes.
that we have, certainly, and bringing us to the table.
Yeah,
Right.
that's important. But my last question, really, since I'm sitting here with two persons that reflect the Christian faith, but we have to realize that there are many different paths. And so built into the religious culture of my Muslim brothers and my Jewish brothers is fasting. They have fasting built into their liturgical calendar. So I had a question that comes up from one in the audience that spoke about that was a Muslim, and saying they had just finished Ramadan, and as a part of that, they had had a period of fasting. So I just want to kind of close out with this question, that really, so that my community will realize that, you can be a believer in the book, or you can be a non-believer, but there are some positive attributes or positive qualities to eating in moderation, even to the point that you may even have periods of fasting. And so let's kind of close out with that, and then maybe after we finish that, you can have like a 1-minute summation of your particular point, and then we'll conclude our conversation today.
Well, I would start off in saying that, I brought this up in our pre-conversation before joining. I'm a proponent of fasting, and that's something I had to learn, actually, as a believer, being exposed in my faith to fasting. It was something that I wasn't amenable to. However, as I'm getting older and I'm moving into the stages of menopause, and I'm doing research and realizing that there's some changes that is happening in my body, fasting became something that I said, okay, that's something that I need. So listening to your body is one of the key factors, I think, in helping you determine if you're on the right track for your health. For certainly, your body gives off those cues. It talks to you. It speaks to you. You just have to open up your ears and listen. And so, yes, it can help with your cortisol level. It can help with readjusting, the gut factors and the microbiome in your system. So I think it's something that, requires the individual to do some research, to read, speak to some experts, certainly, but it can give you clarity for your mind as well. And so I think fasting is a good thing. Now,
Dr. Ingrid, come on, let's have a little round robin and use this as a way of winding down. Come on in on this idea of fasting, particularly from different faith perspectives.
And as you mentioned, across multiple faiths, multiple cultures, there's fasting comes up repeatedly. In my culture, Christian church, we fasted. It was a normal thing. And again, I look back at my great-grandparents. My great-grandfather fasted one weekend every single month. And maybe that's why he lived to 103 and had all his teeth. You know, I joke about that, but I mean, he was serious about what he ate, when he ate. And looking back, he really was practicing intermittent fasting. He didn't eat he said, if the sun is going down, I should not be eating.
Wow.
And I never understood why, but he was doing intermittent fasting. And so it's important. Just about every culture has something around food and fasting. And I think it's because we have, on an instinctive level, this idea about food and medicine, and you are what you eat.
Dr. Calliope?
Thank you. I'll just echo what everyone said and say that the science is frankly still catching up. We have a lot of mixed evidence in terms of the science about for what intermittent fasting is beneficial for who, under what circumstances. So there's a lot of research still to be done. But I think what Chef Thomas said about listening to your body, seeing what works for you, try it out, see how you feel, and ultimately you are the expert in terms of your own health.
Dr. King, you can close it out.
So with the issue of fasting, and I have congregants and community members who ask about this, and I always refer them back to their doctor before they start any process, because I don't know what their health condition is before I send them down a certain road. But what I will say, and I'm glad this question was asked, that has been amazing to me around the issue of fasting and other issues highlighting food and discipline as it relates to food, how it's emphasized in many of our religions much greater than it has been in recent years in the Black church, unfortunately. I have to say that too often, Dr. Hathaway, I have in the past preached eulogies upstairs over a person and served downstairs the kind of food that helped send them out of this world because it was unhealthy. And too often we have not emphasized in our religious institutions the kind of discipline around food and moderation that is absolutely necessary. And I think that that's what the other embryonic parts of our religion, as we look at our Jewish brothers, and then we look at our brothers from the nation, and we look at our Muslim brothers, they are that's front and center. And I think that's one of the things now in my church that is front and center, and it will be.
I want to thank each one of you for just an intriguing panel discussion. I'm going to go down and get me a big 8-ounce glass of water, and I'm going to put me some lemon in it. And I just want to thank you for your time, and I turn it back over to our leaders.
Thank you. I believe Dr. Valerie.
Yeah. So thank you all. This was very enlightening. So I'm just closing us off. I'm a professor at Morgan State University, And so I've really enjoyed our conversation. And for me, the bottom line that we've learned is we have a colorful microbiome. And so eat colorful food, just like my colorful dress. And so I am thankful to all the presenters. It was really, really excellent. And we look forward next time to having more of this. Thank you for all those who also put comments in the panel discussion, both on and also in the chat. And there's also some resources I saw in the chat. If you want to know where to find healthy food in Baltimore, because we've been talking about it, but where is it? So somewhere in the chat, there's a link to where to find healthy food in Baltimore. So as Dr. Hathaway said, let's finish off and go drink a good jug of tasty water and make some colorful food. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.